Can you hear me? What? Come on! Okay, we are live. Anyone here? Well, until then, I'll be watching and listening to Joe Rogan. Ask me anything. And live. I am opening my live view as an article on Methadone. Ask me anything. I will tell you the truth, nothing else. But the truth. So help me God. Now it is time for you to join my live and ask me anything. I will answer even the most personal things. The time begins. Ah, my only I must stop smoking because I don't drink alcohol. I just consume medicine prescribed by doctors specialized in addiction medicine. So that's it. Must stop smoking. I'm like uh, Justin Bieber in young age, in his teens. Shit. My hairstyle is like Justin Bieber. I think I'm not that cute as he is. Shit. I will switch my mic because the other one I think is charged now, and I don't know if this one is at full capacity, working at full capacity. Okay, changing. Okay, we are back, and I think it's working better.
when the 92 elections when Ross Perot was in? Mm-hmm. So when Ross Perot laid out what happened, you remember during that debate where Ross Perot laid out what happened with the tariffs? So like when we try to sell stuff over there, we get a high tariff. It's like a 35% tariff, but they don't get tariffs when it comes over here. It's not the same. It's not like, you guys, there's a tax on everybody if you want to sell your goods to encourage people to buy American products. If you want to sell your products in America, we get a tax. That tax goes to the fucking grid or whatever the hell they're fixing with it.
Right.
Ross Perot this is how all the jobs went to Mexico. Because, have you ever seen that, Jamie? It's see if you can find it. It's a great speech because Ross.
When he talked about the giant sucking sound.
Yes.
Yeah.
You actually mentioned that earlier in the
podcast.
Yes, that's right. That's funny. Did you just see that recently or something?
No, I just remember it.
Oh boy, the giant sucking.
I want also to hear what I'm listening and watching. And no one is on live stream. This is my afternoon, every day's afternoon. Watching, researching, studying. So that's it.
And that's not the case anymore. It was 5% in a poll. I forget what the number was had to reach, but it wasn't a high threshold. And then you could be a part of the debate. And they changed the shit out of that after this because Ross Perot they thought HW was going to go for a second term.
Right.
And meanwhile, Ross Perot fucked it up because a lot of people that would have voted for Bush voted for Ross, and the people that were already voting for Clinton voted for Clinton. And Clinton won. We'll play this. $13, $14 an hour for factory workers. And you can move your factory south of the border, pay $1 an hour for labor, hire a young 20. That's assume you've been in business for a long time. You've got a mature workforce. Pay $1 an hour for your labor. Have no health care. That's the most expensive single element making a car. Have no environmental controls, no pollution controls, and no retirement. And you don't care about anything but making money. There will be a giant sucking sound.
There it is, right there.
See, if people send me to Washington, the first thing I'll do is study that 2,000-page agreement and make sure it's a two-way street. One last point here. I decided I was dumb and didn't understand it, so I called the who's who of folks who've been around it. And I said, why won't everybody go south? They said, we'll be disrupted. I said, well, how long? I finally got them up for 12 to 15 years. I said, well, how does it stop being disrupted? And that is when their jobs come up from $1 an hour to $6 an hour, and ours go down to $6 an hour, then it's level again. But at the same time, you wreck the country with these kinds of people.
Jesus Christ, what a fucking smart man.
He was right. Yeah. That's exactly what happened. American manufacturing collapsed. Yeah, and they did it all for money, and they did it all because they were greedy. They were already rich.
Right.
And if we had just gotten those motherfuckers.
Joe Rogan is turning around. He was on inauguration of President Trump when he started his term, but now he's shifting lanes. Joe Rogan. And a lot of who were supporting Trump are shifting in.
Because it's socialism.
Yeah, they're shifting.
I think it's a great place. Don't you love Canada?
I love it. Well, they have socialized medicine, but it's not. It's a capitalist society.
It is, but socialized medicine, it's expensive. So
what percentage of the Canadians pay in taxes?
So I don't know.
Let's find that out. What's the Canadian tax rate? I know it's higher than Americans.
I know mine's a bitch.
And when you go over there, you have to pay taxes too. Like if you do a gig.
Yeah, you have to pay taxes.
Yeah, you pay Canadian taxes on
and you get paid in Canadian dollars. I'm not going up there much for shows.
Yeah.
But,
So here it is. Canada's top federal income tax rate is 33%, but the U.S. is 37%.
Right.
However, when combining federal, provincial, state taxes, Canadians often face higher marginal rates across various income levels. That's the thing, that theirs is only 33%, ours is 37%. I thought ours was lower than theirs.
I thought ours was 40.
Well, it is when you do a certain tax bracket, correct? Isn't it? Ours changes when you get higher, right?
Yeah, it does.
33% on the portion over $246,000. But what's ours in terms of like the high tax bracket? What's the highest U.S. Is it 37? That's what it is. And what's really crazy to me is when people say the rich should pay more taxes. Okay, Fine. But where do you think that's going? Where's that going? Where's the money going? Is the money going to the federal government? Do you think they're good at it? Do you think they're good at managing your money? If you paid attention to all the shit Elon's fucking uncovered, 37% is when you make over $609,000 a year. That's you, motherfucker.
Yeah, well, it's me last month.
This is the thing. It's like, I'm happy to pay tax if I thought that they were doing a great job. But you are being strong-armed into giving money to people that do a really shitty job of protecting your money and investing it in the country. It's a lot of it is going to bureaucracy and bullshit and a bunch of things that you don't have any say in. If you could like opt out of it, if you could like imagine if you could like pick what you know, if you had like a whole tax sheet, would you like your money to go to? Would you like your money to go to overthrowing governments? No. Like, what if the federal government's budget was entirely based on the will of the people? Like, you get to choose. Like, how much of your money you want to put into drone strikes in Yemen? I don't want zero of my money going to that. You know, how much money do you want to go to this or that or clean water? Okay, clean water sounds good. You know, how much infrastructure? Fuck yeah, fix the streets.
Well, I'm kind of, I agree with you, and I've just heard you say this, that, you know, that everybody should have access to health care and education.
100%.
And the whole country, everybody, that would rise us all up.
100%. Less losers.
Yeah.
That's how you make America great. Less losers. Less people that are saddled down with a lifetime of debt because they broke their leg. That's crazy.
I want to watch full Joe Rogan interview, one of the latest ones. 1 day ago, Joe Rogan's with Jeremy and Edward Harris. 1 day ago. Okay, let's go. Let's see. Jeremy and Edward Harris. Fucking ads. Let's read first what this Joe Experience 2023-11 is all about. Jeremy Harris is the CEO and Eduardo Harris is the CTO of Gladstone Iron, company dedicated to promoting the responsible development and adoption of artificial intelligence. Wow, cool.
Let's get freaked out. Well, okay, so there's one, without speaking of like the fucking doomsday dimension right up here, there's a question about like where are we at in terms of AI capabilities right now and what do those timelines look like? Right. There's a bunch of disagreement. One of the most concrete pieces of evidence that we have recently came out of a lab, an AI evaluation lab called Meter. And they put together this test. Basically, it's like you ask a question, pick a task that takes a certain amount of time, like an hour. That takes like a human a certain amount of time. And then see like how likely
I'll be right back.
is to solve that task. Then try a longer task. See like a 10-hour task. Can it do that one? And so right now what they're finding is when it comes to AI research itself, so basically like automate the work of an AI researcher, you're hitting 50% success rates for these AI systems for tasks that take an hour long. And that is doubling right now it's like every 4 months. So like you had tasks that you could do, you know, a person does in 5 minutes, like, you know, ordering Uber Eats, or like something that takes like 15 minutes, like maybe book a flight or something like that. And it's a question of like, how much can these AI agents do, right? Like from 5 minutes to 15 minutes to 30 minutes, and in some of these spaces like research, software engineering. And it's getting further and further and further, and doubling, it looks like every 4 months. So like if you extrapolate that, you basically get to tasks that take a month to complete. Like by 2027, tasks that take an AI researcher a month to complete, these systems will be completing with like a 50% success rate. So you'll be able to have an AI on your show and ask it what the doomsday clock is like by then.
Probably won't laugh.
You'll have a terrible sense of humor about it. But just make sure you ask you what it had for breakfast before you start, I guess.
Yeah. What about quantum computing getting involved in AI?
Honestly, I don't think it's, if you think that you're going to hit human level AI capabilities across the board, say 2027, 2028, which when you talk to some of the people in the labs themselves, that's the timelines they're looking at. They're not confident, they're not sure, but that seems pretty plausible. If that happens, really there's no way we're going to have quantum computing that's going to be giving enough of a bump to these techniques. You're going to have standard classical computing. One way to think about this is that the data centers that are being built today are being thought of literally as the data centers that are going to house the artificial brain that powers super intelligence, human level AI when it's built in like 2027, something like that.
So how knowledgeable are you when it comes to quantum computing?
So a little bit. I mean, I did my grad studies in like the foundations of quantum mechanics.
Oh, great.
It was a mistake, but I appreciate it for the person.
Why was it a mistake?
So academia is this like kind of funny thing. It's really bad culture. It teaches you some really terrible habits. So basically my entire life after academia, and Ed's too, was unlearning these like terrible habits of, it's all zero sum basically. It's not like when you're working in startups. It's not like when you're working in tech where you build something and somebody else builds something that's complementary and you can team up and just like make something amazing. It's always wars over who gets credit, who gets their name on the paper. Did you cite this fucking stupid paper from 2 years ago because the author has an ego and you got to be on. I was literally at one point. I'm not going to get any details here, but like there was a collaboration that we ran with like this fairly well-known guy, and my supervisor had me like write the emails that he would send from his account so that he was seen as like the guy who was like interacting with this bigwig. That kind of thing is like doesn't tend to happen in startups, at least not in the same way, because everybody wanted
credit for the, like, he wanted to seem like he was the genius who was facilitating this.
sounding smart on email.
Right.
But that happens everywhere. And the reason it happens is that these guys who are like professors, or even not even professors, just like your postdoctoral guy who's like supervising you, they can write your letters of reference and control your career after that lab. They can do whatever. And so what you're doing,
it's like a movie.
Yeah, it's gross.
Like a gross movie. It's a gross boss in a movie that wants to take credit for your work.
And it's real. It's rampant. And the way to escape it is to basically just be like, fuck this. I'm going to go do my own thing. So Jared dropped out of grad school to come start a company. And I mean, honestly, even that, it took both of us like a few years to like unfuck our brains and unlearn the bad habits we learned. It was really only a few years later that we started like really, really getting a good flow going. You're kind of disconnected from the, like base reality when you're in the ivory tower, right? Like there's something beautiful about, and this is why we spent all our time in startups, but there's something really beautiful about like, it's just a bunch of assholes, us, and like no money and nothing, and a world of like potential customers. And it's like, it's not that different from like stand-up comedy in a way. Like your product is, can I get the laugh, right? Like something like that. And it's unforgiving. If you fuck up, it's like silence in the room. It's the same thing with startups. Like the space of products that actually works is so narrow, and you've got to obsess over what people actually want. And it's so easy to fool yourself into thinking that you've got something that's really good because your friends and family are like, oh no, sweetie, you're doing a great job. Like what a wonderful life. I would totally use it. I totally see all that stuff, right? And I love that because it forces you to change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole indoctrination thing in academia is so bizarre because there's these like hierarchies of powerful people, and the idea that you have to work for someone someday and they have to take credit by being the person on the email, that will haunt me for days.
Oh, it's
sorry, I'll be thinking about that for days now. I fucking can't stand people like that. It drives me nuts.
One big consequence is it's really hard to tell who the people are who are creating value in that space too, right?
Of course, sure, because it's just like television. One of the things about television shows is, so I'll give you an example. A very good friend of mine, who's a very famous comedian, had this show, and his agent said, we're going to attach these producers that'll help get it made. And he goes, well, what are they going to do? He goes, they're not going to do anything. It's just be in name. He goes, but they're going to get credit. He goes, yeah. He goes, fuck that. He goes, no, listen. This is better for it. The show. It'll help the show. Right. But then they'll have, they'll have a piece of the show. He's like, yes, but it's a matter of whether the show gets successful or not, and this is a good thing to do. And he's like, what are you talking about? But it was a conflict of interest because this guy the agent was representing these other people. But this is completely common.
Yeah.
So there's these executive producers that are on shows that have zero to do with it.
It's so many industries are like this, and that's why we got into startups. It's literally like you and the world, right?
Yeah.
It's like in a way like stand-up comedy, like Jared said,
or like podcasting,
where your enemy isn't actually hate; it's indifference. Like most of the stuff you do, especially when you're getting started, like why would anyone give a shit about you? They're just not going to pay attention.
Yeah, that's not even your enemy. That's just all potential. That's all that is. Like your enemy's within you. It's like figure out a way to make whatever you're doing good enough that you don't have to think about it not being valuable.
It's meditative. There's no way for it not to be in some way a reflection of yourself. You're kind of in this battle
Keep
with
talking what I need
yourself,
about what I need.
Wants to grow, and then you're constantly trying to compress it. And if there's not that outside force, your ego will expand to fill whatever volume is given to it. If you have money, if you have fame, if everything's given, and you don't make contact with the unforgiving on a regular basis, you're gonna end up doing that to yourself. And
you could. Yeah, it's possible to avoid, but you have to have strategies.
Yeah, you have to be intentional about it. Yeah.
The best strategy is jujitsu. Yeah,
it's
Mark Zuckerberg is a different person now.
Yeah.
You can see it. Yeah, well, it's a really good thing for people that have too much power because you just get strangled all the time.
Yeah.
And then you just get your arms bent sideways, and after a while, you're like, okay, this is reality. This social hierarchy thing that I've created is just nonsense. It's just smoke and mirrors, and they know it is, which is why they so rapidly enforce these hierarchies. Like sir and ma'am and all that kind of shit. That's what it is. You don't feel like you really have respect unless you say that. Ugh. These poor kids that have to go from college where they're talking to these dipshit professors out into the world and operating under these same rules that they've been forced in and indoctrinated to. It's God, to just make it on your own.
It's amazing what you can get used to though, and it's funny you were mentioning the producer thing. That is literally also a thing that happens in academia. So you'll have these conversations where it's like, all right, well, this paper is fucking garbage or something, but we want to get it in a paper, in a journal, and so let's see if we can get a famous guy on the list of authors, so that when it gets reviewed, people are like, oh, Mr. So-and-so, okay, and that literally happens.
The funny thing is, the hissy fits over this are, the stakes are so brutally low. At least with your producer example, someone stands to make a lot of money. With this, it's you get maybe an assistant professorship out of it at best. That's $40,000 a year, and it's just it's just. For the producers, it is money, but I don't even think they notice the money anymore. I think a big part, because all those guys are really, really rich already. I think, if you're a big-time TV producer, you're really rich. I think the big thing is being thought of as a genius who's always connected to successful projects.
Right. Yeah.
That's what they really like.
That is always going to be a thing, right?
It wasn't one producer; it was a couple. So there's going to be a couple different people that were on this thing that had zero to do with it. It was all written by a stand-up comedian. His friends all helped him. They all put it together. And then he was like, no, you want to firing his agent over it.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Yeah.
Good for him. Yeah.
Get the fuck out of here.
At a certain point for the producers, too, it's kind of you'll have people approaching you for help on projects that look nothing like projects you've actually done. So I feel like it just adds noise to your universe. If you're actually trying to build cool shit, you know what I mean?
Some people just want to be busy. They just want more things happening, and they think more is better. More's not better. There's more is energy that takes away from the better, whatever the important shit is.
The focus.
You only have so much time until AI takes over. Then you'll have all the time in the world because no one will be employed and everything will be automated. We'll all be on universal basic income.
And that's a show. That's the end.
That's a sitcom. It's like how much poor people existing on $250 a week.
Oh, I would watch that.
Yeah, because the government just gives everybody that. That's what you live off of.
Like weird shit is cheap. Like the stuff that's like all like, well, the stuff you can get from chatbots and AI agents is cheap, but like food is super expensive or something. And
the organic food is going to be, you're going to have to kill people for it.
you will eat people. It will be like a Soylent World.
Right.
Hey,
Soylent Green.
Yeah. It's more free range than people, though.
That's true. Depends on what they're eating, though. It's just like animals. You know, you don't want to eat a bear that's been eating salmon. They taste like shit.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I've been eating my bear raw this entire time.
So back to the quantum thing. So quantum computing is infinitely more powerful than standard computing. Would it make sense then that if quantum computing can run a large language model, that it would reach a level of intelligence that's just preposterous?
So yeah, one way to think of it is like there are problems that quantum computers can solve way better than classical computers. And so like the numbers get absurd pretty quickly. It's like problems that a classical computer couldn't solve if it had the entire lifetime of the universe to solve it.
Right.
A quantum computer, right, in like 30 seconds, boom. But the flip side, like there are problems that quantum computers just like can't help us accelerate. The kinds of like one classic problem that quantum computers help with is this thing called like the traveling salesman paradox or problem, where you have like a bunch of different locations that a salesman needs to hit, and what's the best path to hit them most efficiently. It's like kind of a classic problem if you're going around different places and have to make stops. There are a lot of different problems that have the right shape for that. A lot of quantum machine learning, which is a field, is focused on how do we take standard AI problems, like AI workloads that we want to run, and like massage them into a shape that gives us a quantum advantage. And it's a nascent field. There's a lot going on there. I would expect, like my personal expectation is that we just build human level AI and very quickly after that super intelligence without ever having to factor in quantum. But it's
can you define that for people? What's the difference between human level AI and super intelligence?
Yeah. So yeah, human level AI is like AI. You can imagine like it's AI that is as smart as you are in, let's say, all the things you can do on a computer. So you can order food on a computer, but you can also write software on a computer. You can also email people and pay them to do shit on a computer. You can also trade stocks on a computer. So it's like as smart as a smart person for that. Super intelligence, people have various definitions, and there are all kinds of like honestly hissy fits about like different definitions. Generally speaking, it's something that's like very significantly smarter than the smartest human. And so you think about it, it's kind of like it's as much smarter than you as you might be smarter than a toddler. And you think about that, and you think about like how would a toddler control you? It's kind of hard. Like you can outthink a toddler pretty much like any day of the week. And so super intelligence gets us at these levels where you can potentially do things that are completely different and basically new scientific theories. And last time we talked about new stable forms of matter that were being discovered by these kind of narrow systems. But now you're talking about a system that is like has that intuition combined with the ability to talk to you as a human and to just have really good like rapport with you. It can also do math. It can also write code. It can also like solve quantum mechanics and has that all kind of wrapped up in the same package. So one of the things too that by definition, if you build a human level AI, one of the things it must be able to do as well as humans is AI research itself. Yeah, or at least the parts of AI research that you can do in just like software, like in by coding or whatever these systems are designed to do. And so one implication of that is you now have automated AI researchers. And if you have automated AI researchers, that means you have AI systems that can automate the development of the next level of their own capabilities. Right. And now you're getting into that whole singularity thing where it's an exponential that just builds on itself, which is kind of why a lot of people argue that like if you build human level AI, super intelligence can't be that far away. You basically unlocked everything.
And we kind of have gotten very close, right? Like it's past the Fermi, not the Fermi paradox. What is it?
We
were just talking about it the other day.
The test. The Turing test.
Turing test.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're just talking about how horrible what happened to him was, they chemically castrated him because he was gay.
Yeah.
Horrific. Winds up killing himself. The guy who figures out what's the test to figure out whether or not AIs become sentient. And by the way, he does this in 1950s.
Oh yeah. Alan Turing is the guy was a beast, right?
How did he think that through?
He invented computers. He invented basically the concept that underlies all computers. Like he was like an absolute beast. He was a code breaker. That he broke the Nazi codes, right? And he also wasn't even the first person to come up with this idea of machines building machines and there being implications like human disempowerment. So if you go back to, I think it was like the late 1800s, and I don't remember the guy's name, but he sort of like came up with this. He was observing the Industrial Revolution and the mechanization of labor and kind of starting to see more and more, like if you zoom out, it's almost like you have humans are an ant colony, and the artifacts that colony is producing, they're really interesting are these machines.
Yeah.
You kind of like look at the surface of the earth as like gradually, increasingly mechanized thing, and it's not super clear if you zoom out enough, like what is actually running the show here?
Right.
Like you've got humans servicing machines, humans looking to improve the capability of these machines at this frantic pace. Like they're not even in control of what they're doing. Economic forces are pushing.
Be the servant of the master, right? At a certain point, like.
Yeah, and the whole thing is like, especially with the competition that's going on between the labs and just kind of in general, you're at a point where like, do the CEOs of the labs, like they're these big figureheads, they go on interviews, they talk about what they're doing and stuff. Do they really have control over any part of the system? The economy is in this like almost convulsive fit, right? Like you can almost feel like it's hurling out AGI, and like for as one kind of I guess data point here, like all these labs, OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, every year they're spending like an air.
Maybe later, Gemini. Gemini, come on.
Aircraft carrier worth of capital, individually, each of them, just to build bigger data centers, to house more AI chips, to train bigger, more powerful models. And that's like, so we're actually getting to the point where if you look at on a power consumption basis, like we're getting to, 2, 3, 4, 5% of US power production. If you project out into the late 2020s, kind of
2026, 27. You're talking about
not for double digit though.
Not for double digit, but for single digit. Yeah, you're talking like that's a few gigawatts. So 1 gigawatt.
Sorry, not for single digit. It's in the like for 2027. You're looking at like in the 0.5-ish%. But it's like it's a big fucking like you're talking about gigawatts and gigawatts. 1 gigawatt is 1 million homes. So you're seeing like one data center in 2027 is easily going to break a gig. There's going to be multiple like that, and so it's like 1 million home city. Metropolis, really, that is just dedicated to training like one fucking model. Like that's what this is. Again, if you zoom out at planet Earth, you can interpret it as like this, like all these humans frantically running around like ants, just like building this like artificial brain. That's like one
mind assembling itself on the face of the planet. Marshall McLuhan in like 1963 or something like that said, "Human beings are the sex organs of the machine world."
Oh God,
that hits different today.
Yeah, it does.
It does. I've always said that if we were aliens, or if aliens came here and studied us, they'd be like, "What is the dominant species on the planet doing?" Well, it's making better things.
Yeah.
That's all it does. But the whole thing is dedicated to making better things, and all of its instincts, including materialism, including status, keeping up with the Joneses, all that stuff is tied to newer, better stuff. You don't want old shit.
Yeah.
You want new stuff. You don't want an iPhone 12. What are you doing, you loser? You need newer, better stuff. And they convince people, especially in the realm of like consumer electronics, most people are buying things they absolutely don't need. The vast majority of the spending on new phones is completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
But I just need that extra fourth camera though. I feel like my life isn't complete. I run one of my phones is an iPhone 11, and I'm purposely not switching it just to see if I notice it. I fucking never notice anything. I watch YouTube on it. I text people. It's all the same. I go online. It works. It's all the same.
Probably the biggest thing there is going to be the security side, which
no, they update the security. It's all software.
But I mean, if your phone gets old enough, I mean, like at a certain point,
when they stop updating it, like iPhone 1, China's watching all your dick pics.
Oh, dude. I mean, Salt Typhoon, they're watching all our dick pics.
Yeah.
They're definitely seeing mine.
What's Salt Typhoon?
So it's this big Chinese cyber attack actually starts to get us to kind of the broader.
What a great name, by the way. Salt Typhoon. Fuck yeah, guys.
I really wish I was.
They have the coolest names for their cyber operations meant to destroy us.
Yeah.
Salt Typhoon.
They gotta stop.
slick.
You know what? It's kind of like when people go out and do like an awful thing, like a school shooting or something, and they're like, oh, let's talk about, if you give it a cool name, like now the Chinese are definitely going to do it again. Anyway,
Because they have a cool name.
Yeah, that's definitely a
Salt Typhoon.
Salt Typhoon.
Pretty dope.
Yeah, but it's this thing where basically, so there was in the 3G kind of protocol that was set up years ago. Law enforcement agencies included backdoors intentionally to be able to access comms, theoretically if they got a warrant and so on. And you introduce a backdoor, you have adversaries like China who are wicked good at cyber. They're going to find and exploit those backdoors, and now basically they're sitting there, and they had been for, some people think, like maybe a year or two before it was really discovered. And just a couple months ago, they kind of go like, oh, cool, like we got fucking like China all up in our shit.
And this is like flip a switch for them, and like you turn off the power or water to a state, or like you fucking
Well, Salt Typhoon though is about just sitting on the like basically telecoms now.
Oh, that's the telecom one.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's not the, but yeah, I mean that's another thing.
There's another thing where they're doing that too.
Yeah, and so this is kind of where what we've been looking into over the last year is this question of if you're going to make like a Manhattan Project for superintelligence, right? That's what we were texting about like way back, and then actually, funnily enough, we shifted our date for security reasons, but. If you're going to do a Manhattan Project for superintelligence, what does that have to look like? What does the security game have to look like to actually make it so that China's not all up in your shit? Like today, it is extremely clear that at the world's top AI labs, like all that shit is being stolen. Like there's not a single lab right now that isn't being spied on successfully based on everything we've seen by the Chinese.
Can I ask you this? Yeah. Are we spying on the Chinese as well?
That's a big problem. Do you want to?
We're definitely doing some stuff. But in terms of the relative balance between the two, we're not where we need to be. They spy on us better than we spy on them.
Yeah, because they build all our shit.
They build all our shit. That was the Huawei situation, right?
Yeah, and it's also oh my god, it's if you look at the power grid. So this is now public, but if you look at transformer substations, so these are essentially they're a crucial part of the electrical grid, and there's really basically all of them have components that are made in China. China's known to have planted backdoors like Trojans into those substations to fuck with our grid. The thing is, when you see a Salt Typhoon, when you see big Chinese cyber attack or big Russian cyber attack, you're not seeing their best. These countries do not go and show you their best cards out the gate. You show the bare minimum that you can without tipping your hand at the actual exquisite capabilities you have. Like the way that one of the people kind of who's been walking us through all this really well explained it is the philosophy is you want to learn without teaching. Right, you want to use what is the lowest level capability that has the effect on after.
So
that's what that
I'll give an example. I'll tell you a story that's kind of it's a public story. It's from a long time ago, but it kind of gives a flavor of how far these countries will actually go when they're playing the game for fucking real. So it's 1945. America and the Soviet Union are best pals because they've just defeated the Nazis, right? To celebrate that victory and the coming new world order that's going to be great for everybody, the children of the Soviet Union give as a gift to the American ambassador in Moscow this beautifully carved wooden seal of the United States of America. Beautiful thing. Ambassador is thrilled with it. He hangs it up behind his desk in his private office. You can see where I'm going with this probably, but 7 years later, 1952, finally occurs to us, let's take it down and actually examine this. So they dig into it, and they find this incredible contraption in it called a cavity resonator. And this device doesn't have a power source, doesn't have a battery, which means when you're sweeping the office for bugs, you're not going to find it. What it does instead is it's designed, that's it. It's
the thing. They call it the thing. And what this cavity resonator does is it's basically designed to reflect radio radiation back to a receiver to listen to all the noises and conversations and talking in the ambassador's private office. And so
how's it doing it without a power source?
So that's what they do. So the Soviets, for 7 years, parked a van across the street from the embassy, had a giant fucking microwave antenna aimed right at the ambassador's office, and were like zapping it and looking back at the reflection and literally listening to every single thing he was saying. And the best part was when the embassy staff was like, we're going to go and like sweep the office for bugs periodically, they'd be like, hey, Mr. Ambassador, we're about to sweep your office for bugs. And the ambassador was like, cool, please proceed and go and sweep my office for bugs. And the KGB dudes in the van were like, just turn it off. Sounds like they're going to sweep the office for bugs. Let's turn off our giant microwave antenna. And they kept at it for 7 years. It was only ever discovered because there was this like British radio operator who was just doing his thing, changing his dial, and he's like, "Oh shit! Like, is that the ambassador?" Just randomly. Like, so the thing is, and actually, sorry, one other thing about that. If you heard that story and you're kind of thinking to yourself, "Hang on a second, they were shooting like microwaves at our ambassador 24/7 for 7 years.
Whoa!
Doesn't that seem like it might like fry his genitals or something?" Yeah, or something like that.
You're supposed to have a lead vest.
And the answer is yes.
Yes.
Yes. And this is something that came up in our investigation just from every single person who was filling us in and who dialed in and knows what's up. They're like, look, so you got to understand, like our adversaries, if they need to like give you cancer in order to rip your shit off of your laptop, they're going to give you some cancer. Because I don't know specifically about the ambassador, but like that's also so we're limited what we can say. There's actually people that you talk to later that can go in more detail here, but older technology like that, like kind of lower powered, so you're less likely to look at that. Nowadays, we live in a different world. The guy that invented that microphone his last name is Theremin. He invented this instrument called the Theremin, which is a fucking really interesting thing.
He's just moving his hands?
Yeah, your hands control it waving over this.
What?
It's a fucking wild instrument.
Have you seen this before, Jamie?
Yeah, I saw Juicy J playing it yesterday on Instagram. He's like practicing. It's so fucking
wow.
He's also really good at it too. Yeah. There's both hands are controlling it by moving in and out in space, X, Y. I honestly don't really know how the fuck it works, but I've seen it.
That is wild.
It's also a lot harder to do than it seems. So the Americans tried to replicate this for years and years and years without really succeeding. And anyway, that's all kind of part.
I have a friend who used to work for an intelligence agency, and he was working in Russia. And they found that the building was bugged with these super sophisticated bugs that operated. Their power came from the swaying of the building.
Get out. I've never heard that one
swaying before. Just like your watch, like I have a mechanical watch on, so when I move my watch, it powers up the spring and it keeps the watch. That's how an automatic mechanical watch works. They figured out a way to, just by the subtle swaying of the building in the wind, that was what was powering this listening device. So this is the thing, right? Like what the fuck?
Well, and the things that nation states.
So, Jimmy?
Google says that's what was powering this thing, the Great Seal bug, which I think is the thing. So
there's another one?
No. Oh, this is so you can actually see in that video. I think there was a YouTube. Yeah. So
same kind of thing, Jimmy.
I typed in Russia spy bug building sway. Building sway. The thing is what pops up.
The thing,
which is what we were just talking about.
Oh, that thing. So that's powered the same way by the sway of the building.
I think it was powered by radio frequency emission. So there may be another thing related to it. Not sure, but yeah.
Maybe Google's a little confused. Maybe it's the word sway is what's throwing it off.
But it's a great catch, and the only reason we even know that too is that when the U-2s were flying over Russia, they had a U-2 that got shot down in 1960. The Russians go like, like friggin' Americans like spying on us. What the fuck? I thought we were buddies. Or well, it's the 60s, obviously. Think that, but and then the Americans are like, okay, bitch, look at this, and they brought out the seal. And that's how it became public. It was basically like the response to the Russians saying, like,
wow. Yeah, they're all dirty.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone's spying on everybody.
That's the thing.
And I think they probably all have some sort of UFO technology.
We used to talk about that.
We turn off our mics and I'm 99% sure a lot of that shit is ours.
You need to talk to some of the...
I've been talking to people.
I've
been talking to a lot of people.
There might be some other people that you'd be interested in
I would
chatting.
very much be interested. Here's the problem. Some of the people I'm talking to, I'm positive they're talking to me to give me bullshit. Because I'm
Are we on your list?
No, you guys aren't on the list. But there's certain people I'm like, okay, maybe most of this is true, but some of it's not on purpose. There's that. I guarantee you, I know I talk to people that don't tell me the truth.
Yeah. It's an interesting problem in like all intel, right? Because there's always the mix of incentives is so fucked. Like the adversary's trying to add noise into the system. You got pockets of people within the government that have different incentives from other pockets,
and then you have top secret clearance and all sorts of other things that are going on. Yeah. One guy that texted me, he's like, the guy telling you that they aren't real is literally involved in these meetings. So stop. Just stop listening to him.
It's like one of the techniques, right? It's like is actually to inject so much noise that you don't know what's what. You can't follow. So this actually this happened in the COVID thing, right? The lab leak versus the natural like wet market thing. Yeah. So I remember there was a debate that happened about what was the origin of COVID. This was like a few years ago. It was like an 18 or 20 hour long YouTube debate, just like punishingly long. And it was like there was $100,000 bet either way on who would win. And it was like lab leak versus wet market. And at the end of the 18 hours, the conclusion was like one of them won, but the conclusion was like it's basically 50-50 between them. And then I remember like hearing that and talking to some folks and being like, hang on a second. So you got to believe that whether it came from a lab or whether it came from a wet market, one of the top 3 priorities of the CCP from a propaganda standpoint is like, don't get fucking blamed for COVID. And that means they're putting like $1 to $10 billion in some of their best people on a global propaganda effort to cover up evidence and confuse and blah, blah, blah. You really think that your 50%, like that confusion isn't coming from that incredibly resourced effort? Like they know what they're doing.
Particularly when different biologists and virologists who weren't attached to anything were talking about like the cleavage points and this different aspects of the virus that appeared to be genetically manipulated. The fact that there was only one spillover event, not multiple ones. None of it made any sense. All of it seemed like some sort of a genetically engineered virus. It seemed like gain of function research, and your early emails were talking about that, and then everybody changed their opinion.
And even the taboo, right, against talking about it through that lens.
Oh yeah, total propaganda. It's racist.
Yeah,
which is crazy because nobody thought the Spanish flu was racist, and it didn't even really come from Spain.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
It came from Kentucky.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think it was Kentucky or Virginia. Where did the Spanish flu originate from? But nobody got mad.
Well, that's because the state of Kentucky has an incredibly sophisticated propaganda machine.
Pinned it on Kentucky. I think it was an agricultural thing. Huh. Kansas. Thank you.
Yeah, goddamn Kansas. I've always said that. I've always
likely originated in the United States. H1N1 strain that had genes of avian origin. By the way, people always talk about the Spanish flu. If it was around today, everybody would just get antibiotics and it would be fine. So this whole mass die off of people.
It would be like the Latinx flu, and we would be
the Latinx flu.
The Latinx flu.
So that one didn't stick at all.
It didn't stick.
Latinx.
No.
There's a lot of people like claiming they never used it. And they pull up old videos of them. Like that's a dumb one. Like it's literally a gendered language. You fucking idiot. Like, you can't just do that.
It went on for a while though. Like
sure, everything goes on for a while.
Yeah.
So think about how long they did lobotomies. They did lobotomies for 50 fucking years. Before they went, hey, maybe we should stop doing this.
It was like the same attitude that got Turing chemically castrated, right? I mean, actually, like, hey, let's just get in there and fuck around a bit.
Well, this is before they had SSRIs and all sorts of other interventions. But what was the year of lobotomies I believe it stopped at 67. Was it 50 years?
I think you said 70 last time, and that was correct.
70 years?
1970.
Oh, I think it was 67.
I like how this has come up so many times that Jamie's like, I think last time you said it was.
It comes up all the time because it's one of those things.
It's
It's like you can't just trust the medical establishment.
Especially 67. It says maybe one more in 7.
Oh God! Oh, he died in 72. When did they start? I think they started in the 30s or the 20s rather.
That's pretty
35.
ballsy. You know, the first
So
guy,
24.
guy who did a lobotomy.
Yeah, it says
You gotta
24.
wonder.
Freeman arrives Washington DC Direct Labs. 35. They tried it first.
Autonomy.
Imagine that and just scramble your fucking brains.
But doesn't it make you feel better to call it a leucotomy though? Because that sounds a lot more professional.
No. Lobotomy. Leucotomy sounds gross. Sounds like loogie. Like you're like a loogie. Like lobotomy. Boy. Topeka, Kansas. Also Kansas. All roads point to Kansas.
This is a problem.
So that's what's happening. Everything's flat. You just lose your fucking marbles. You go crazy.
That's the main issue.
Jesus
But that's
Christ.
yeah.
So they did this for so long.
Somebody won a Nobel Prize for lobotomy.
Wonderful.
Imagine
Give that
being
back,
that
you piece of
person.
shit.
Yes, seriously. You're kind of like, you don't want to display it up on your shelf.
But
like,
it's just a good indicator. It's like it should let you know that oftentimes science is incorrect, and that oftentimes, unfortunately, people have a history of doing things, and then they have to justify that they've done these things.
Yeah.
And they.
But now there's so much more tooling too, right? If you're a nation state and you want to fuck with people and inject narratives into the ecosystem, right? Like the whole idea of autonomous AI agents too, like having these basically like Twitter bots or whatever bots. Like one thing we've been thinking about too on the side is like the idea of audience capture, right? Do you have like big people with high profiles and kind of gradually steering them towards a position by creating bots that like through comments, through votes,
100%.
It's
absolutely real.
Yeah, and a couple of the big accounts on X that we're in touch with have sort of said like, especially in the last 2 years, it's actually become hard, like especially the thoughtful ones, right? It's become hard to like stay sane, not on X, but like across social media, on all the platforms. And that is around when, it became possible to have AIs that can speak like people, 90%, 95% of the time. And so you have to imagine that, adversaries are using this and doing this and pushing the frontier.
No
like
doubt. They'd be fools if they didn't.
Oh yeah, 100%.
You have to do it because for sure we're doing that.
And this is one of the things where, like it used to be. So OpenAI actually used to do this assessment of their AI models as part of their kind of what they call their preparedness framework that would look at the persuasion capabilities of their models as one kind of threat vector. They pulled that out recently, which is kind of like, why? You can argue that it makes sense. I actually think it's somewhat concerning because one of the things you might worry about is if these systems sometimes they get trained through what's called reinforcement learning. Potentially, you could imagine training these to be super persuasive by having them interact with real people and convince them, convincing them to do specific things. If you get to that point, these labs ultimately will have the ability to deploy agents at scale that can just persuade a lot of people to do whatever they want, including pushing legislative agendas,
and even help them prep for meetings with the Hill, the administration, whatever. Like, how should I convince this person to do that?
Well, they'll do that with text messages. Make it more business-like.
Yep.
Make it friendlier. Make it more jovial.
But this is like the same optimization pressure that keeps you on TikTok. That same addiction. Imagine that applied to persuading you of some fact, right?
Yeah.
That's like a.
On the other hand, maybe a few months from now, we're all just going to be very, very convinced that it was all fine. It's going to be good. We're just going to be very, very convinced that it was all fine. It's going to be good.
Yeah, maybe they'll get so good that it'll make sense to you. Maybe they'll just be right.
That's how it works.
Yeah, it's a confusing time period. We've talked about this ad nauseum, but it bears repeating. This former FBI analyst who investigated Twitter before Elon bought it said that he thinks it's about 80% bots.
Yeah. Yeah.
80%.
That's one of the reasons why the bot purge, like when Elon acquired it and started working on it, is so important. Like there needs to be, the challenge is like detecting these things is so hard, right?
So increasingly, like more and more, they can hide like basically perfectly. Like how do you tell the difference between a cutting edge AI bot and a human? Just from the
you can't, because they
actually can
generate AI images of a family, of a backyard barbecue, post all these things up and make it seem like it's real.
Yep.
Especially now, AI images are insanely good now.
They really are.
Yes, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And if you have a person, you could take a photo of a person, manipulate it in any way you'd like, and then now this is your new guy. You can do it instantaneously, and then this guy has a bunch of opinions on things. It seems to always align with the Democratic Party, but whatever. He's a good guy. He's a family man. Look, he's out his barbecue. He's not even a fucking human being. And people are arguing with this bot, like back and forth. And you'll see it on any social issue. You see it with Gaza and Palestine. You see it with abortion. You see it with religious freedoms.
Yeah.
You just see these bots. You see these arguments, and you see like various levels. You see like the extreme position, and then you see more reasonable centrist position. But essentially what they're doing is they're consistently moving what's okay further and further in a certain direction.
And in fact, it's both directions. Like it's like
Right.
you know how when you're trying to like you're trying to capsize a boat or something, you're like fucking with your buddy on the lake or something. So you push on one side, then you push on the other side, then you push until eventually it capsizes. This is kind of like our electoral process is already naturally like this, right? We go like we have a party in power for a while, and then like they get they basically get like you get tired of them and you switch, and that's kind of the natural way how democracy works or in a republic. But the way that adversaries think about this is they're like, perfect, this swing back and forth, all we have to do is like when it's on this way, you push and push and push and push until it goes more extreme, and then there's a reaction to it, right? And now swinging back, and we push and push and push on the other side until eventually something breaks, and that's the risk.
Yikes.
Yeah, it's also like the organizations that are doing this, like we already know this is part of Russia's MO, China's MO, because back when it was easier to detect, we already could see them doing this shit. So there is this website called This Person Does Not Exist. It still exists surely now, but it's kind of
superseded.
Yeah. But you would like every time you refresh this website, you would see a different like human face that was AI generated. And what the Russian Internet Research Agency would do. Yeah, exactly. What all these and it's actually I don't think they've really upgraded it since. Stop.
That's fake.
Yeah.
Wow, they're so good.
This is old. This is like years old.
And you could actually detect these things pretty reliably. Like you might remember the whole thing about AI systems were having a hard time generating like hands that only had like 5 fingers.
Right.
That's
over though.
That's over.
Yeah, little hints of it were though back in the day in This Person Does Not Exist, and you'd have the Russians would take like a face from that and then use it as the profile picture for like a Twitter bot.
Right.
And so that you could actually detect. You'd be like, okay, I've got you there. I can kind of get a rough count.
Right.
Now we can't, but we definitely know they've been in the game for a long time. Yeah. There's no way they're not.
And the thing with the nation state like propaganda attempts, right, is that like people have this idea that like like I've caught this like Chinese influence operation or whatever, like we nailed them. The reality is nation states operate at like 30 different levels, and if you're a priority, like just influencing our information spaces is a priority for them, they're not just going to operate, they're not just going to pick a level and do it, they're going to do all 30 of them. And so even if you're like among the best in the world like detecting this shit, you're gonna catch and stop like levels 1 through 10, and then you're gonna be aware of like level 11, 12, 13, like you're working against it, and you're maybe you're starting to think about level 16, and you imagine like about level 18 or whatever, but they're above you, below you, all around you. They're incredibly resourced. This is something that came through very strongly for us.
You guys have seen the Yuri Bezmenov video from 1984 where he's talking about how all our educational institutions have been captured by Soviet propaganda. It was talking about Marxism, how it's been injected into school systems, and how you have essentially 2 decades before you're completely captured by these ideologies, and it's going to permeate and destroy all of your confidence in democracy. And he was 100% correct. And this is before these kind of tools, because like the vast majority of the exchanges of information right now are taking place on social media. The vast majority of debating about things, arguing, all taking place on social media. And if that FBI analyst is correct, 80% of it's bullshit.
Yeah.
Which is really wild.
Well, and you look at like some of the documents that have come out. I think it was like I think it was the CIA game plan, right, for regime change or like undermining, or like how do you do it, right? Have multiple decision makers at every level, have you know, all these things, and like what a surprise! That's exactly what like the U.S. bureaucracy looks like today.
Slow everything down, make change impossible, make it so that everybody gets frustrated with it and they give up hope. They decided to do that to other countries. Like for sure, they do that here.
Open society, right? I mean that's part of the trade-off, and that's actually a big part of the challenge too. So when we're working on this, right, one of the things Ed was talking about, these 30 different layers of security access or whatever, one of the consequences is you bump into a team like the teams we ended up working with on this project were folks that we bumped into after the end of our last investigation, who kind of were like,
we talked about last year.
Like looking at AGI, looking at the national security kind of landscape around that, and a lot of them were like really well placed. It was like special forces guys from tier 1 units, like a SEAL Team 6 type thing, and because they're so, you'll see people who are like ridiculously smart, like the best people in the world at doing whatever the thing is, like to break this security, and they don't know often about like another group of guys who have a completely different capability set, and so what you find is like you're indexing like hard on this vulnerability, and then suddenly someone says, "Oh yeah, but by the way, I can just hop that fence."
So the really funny thing about this is like most, or even like almost all of the really like elite security people kind of think that like all the other security people are dumbasses, even when they're not.
Or like they're biased in the direction of, because it's so easy when everything's like stovepiped.
But so most people who say they're like elite at security actually are dumbasses. Because most security is like about checking boxes and like SOC 2 compliance and shit like that.
Yeah, it's what it is like, so everything's so stovepiped that you literally can't know what the exquisite state of the art is in another domain. So it's a lot easier for somebody to come up and be like, "Oh yeah, like I'm actually really good at this other thing that you don't know." And so figuring out who actually is we had this experience over and over where like you run into a team and then you run into another team, they have an interaction, you're kind of like, "Oh, interesting." So like like these are the really kind of the people at the top of their game. And that's been this very long process to figure out, like, okay, what does it take to actually secure our critical infrastructure, like CCP, for example, like Chinese attacks, if we're building a superintelligence project? And it's this weird like kind of challenge because of the stovepiping. No one has the full picture, and like we don't think that we have it even now, but definitely don't know of anyone who's come like that, like this close to it.
The best people are the ones who, when they encounter another team and other ideas and start to engage with it, are like, instead of being like, "Oh, like you don't know what you're talking about," who just like actually lock on and go like, "That's fucking interesting. Tell me more about that."
Right. People that have control of their ego.
100%.
With everything.
The best of the best. The best of the best, like, got there by eliminating their ego as much as they could.
Yeah.
Always the way it is.
Yeah, and it's also like the fact of the 30 layers of the stack or whatever it is of all these security issues means that no one can have the complete picture at any one time, and the stack is changing all the time. People are inventing new shit. Things are falling in and out of, and so figuring out what is that team that can actually get you that complete picture is an exercise. You can't really do. It's hard to do it from the government side because you got to engage with data center building companies. You got to engage with AI labs, and in particular with like insiders at the labs who will tell you things that, by the way, the lab leadership will tell you the opposite of in some cases. And so it's just this Gordian knot. Like it took us months to like pin down every kind of dimension that we think we pinned down.
I'll give an example actually of that, like the trying to do the handshake right between different sets of people. So we were talking to one person who's thinking hard about data center security, working with like frontier labs on this shit, very much like at the top of her game, but she's kind of from like the academic space, kind of Berkeley, like the avocado toast kind of side of the spectrum, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And she's talking to us. She reviewed the report we put out, the investigation we put out, and she's like, I think you guys are talking to the wrong people. And we're like, can you say more about that? She's like, well, I don't think like you talk to tier 1 special forces. I don't think they like know much about that. We're like, okay, that's not correct, but can you say why? She's like, I feel like those are just the people that like go and like bomb stuff.
Blow shit up.
Blow shit up.
It's understandable too, because like
it's totally understandable.
A lot of people have the wrong sense of like what a tier 1 asset actually can do. It's like,
well, that's ego on her part because she doesn't understand what they do.
It's ego all the way down, right? I mean, like,
but that's a dumb thing to say. You literally don't know what they do. You say, don't they just blow stuff up? Where's my latte?
It's a weirdly good impression.
But she did ask for a latte.
Yeah, she did. But
did she talk in upspeak? You should fire everyone who talks in upspeak.
She didn't talk in upspeak, but
the moment they do that, you should just tell them to leave. There's no way you have an original thought. This is how you talk.
China, can you get out of our data center?
Yeah, please.
I don't want to rip on that too much though, because this is the one really important factor here is all these groups have a part of the puzzle, and they're all fucking amazing. They are like world class at their own little slice, and a big part of what we've had to do is like bring people together, and they're people who've helped us immeasurably do this, but like bring people together and explain to them the value that each other has in a way that's like that allows that bridge building to be made. By the way, the tier 1 guys are the most like ego moderated of the people that we talk to. There's a lot of like Silicon Valley hubris going around right now where people are like, listen, like get out of our way. We'll figure out how to do this like super secure data center infrastructure. We got this. Why? Because we're the guys building AGI, motherfucker. Like that's kind of the attitude. And it's like, cool, man. Like that's like a doctor having an opinion about like how to repair your car. I get that it's not the like elite kind of like whatever, but someone has to help you build like a good friggin' fence. Like, I mean, it's not just that.
Dunning-Kruger effect.
It's a mixed bag too, because like, yes, a lot of the hyperscalers like Google, Amazon, genuinely do have some of the best private sector security around data centers in the world, like hands down. The problem is there's levels above that, and the guys who like look at what they're doing and see what the holes are just go like, oh yeah, like I could get in there, no problem, and they can fucking do it.
One thing my wife said to me on a couple of occasions, like, you seem to like, and this was towards the beginning of the project, like, you seem to like change your mind a lot about what the right configuration is of how to do this. And yeah, it's because every other day you're having a conversation with somebody who's like, oh yeah, like great job on this thing, but like I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this other completely different thing, and that just fucks everything over. And so you have enough of those conversations, and at a certain point, your plan, your game plan on this can no longer look like we're going to build a perfect fortress. It's got to look like we're going to account for our own uncertainty on the security side and the fact that we're never going to be able to patch everything. Like you have to. I mean, it's like
and that means you actually have to go on offense from the beginning. Because like the truth is, and this came up over and over again, there's no world where you're ever going to build the perfect, exquisite fortress around all your shit and hide behind your walls like this forever. That just doesn't work, because no matter how perfect your system is and how many angles you've covered, like your adversary is super smart, is super dedicated. If you see the field to them, they're right up in your face and they're reaching out and touching you, and they're trying to see like what your seams are, where they break. And that just means you have to reach out and touch them from the beginning. Because until you've actually like reached out and used a capability and proved like we can take down that infrastructure, we can like disrupt that cyber operation, we can do this, we can do that, you don't know if that capability is real or not. Like you might just be like lying to yourself. I'm like, I can do this thing whenever I want, but actually
you're kind of more in academia mode than like startup mode, because you're not making contact every day with the thing, right? You have to touch the thing, and there's a related issue here, which is a kind of like willingness that came up over and over again. Like one of the kind of gurus of this space was like, a couple of them made the point that You can have the most exquisite capability in the world, but if you don't actually have the willingness to use it, you might as well not have that capability. And the challenge is right now, China, Russia, like our adversaries, pull all kinds of stunts on us and get no consequences.
Particularly during the previous administration, this was a huge problem during the previous administration, where you actually had sabotage operations being done on American soil by our adversaries, where you had administration officials, as soon as like a thing happened. So there were, for example, there was like 4 different states had their 911 systems go down like at the same time, different systems to like unrelated stuff. But it was like it's this stuff where it's like, let me see if I can do that. Let me see if I can do it. Let me see what the reaction is. Let me see what the chatter is that comes back after I do that. And one of the things that was actually pretty disturbing about that was under that administration or regime or whatever, the response you got from the government right out the gate was, "Oh, it's an accident," and that's actually unusual. The proper procedure, the normal procedure in this case, is to say, we can't comment on an ongoing investigation, which we've all heard, right? Like, we can't comment on blah,
We can
blah.
either confirm or deny.
Exactly. It's all that stuff, and that's what they say typically out the gate when they're investigating stuff. But instead, coming out and saying, "Oh, it's just an accident," is a break with.
What do you attribute that to?
If they say, if they leave an opening or say, actually, this is an adversary action, we think it's an adversary action, they have to respond. The public demands a response, and they don't. They were
There's a fear of escalation.
fearful
So
of escalating.
So what ends up happening, right, is, and by the way, that thing about like it's an accident comes out often before there would have been time for investigators to physically fly on site and take a look. Like, there's no logical way that you could even know that at the time, and they're like, "Oh, that's an accident. Don't worry about it."
So they have an official answer, and then their response is to just bury their head in the sand and not investigate.
Right, because if you were to investigate, if you were to say, "Okay, we looked into this, it actually looks like it's fucking like country X that just did this thing."
Right.
If that's the conclusion, it's hard to imagine the American people not being like, what are we, like, we're letting these people injure our American citizens on U.S. soil, take out like U.S. National security, like, or critical infrastructure, and we're not doing anything. Like, the concern is about this, like, we're getting in our own way of thinking like, oh, well, escalation is going to happen, and boom, we run straight to like, there's going to be a nuclear war, everybody's going to die. So, like, when you do that, the peace between nations, stability, does not come from the absence of activity. It comes from consequence. It comes from, just like if you have, an individual who misbehaves in society, there's a consequence and people know it's coming. You need to train your counterparts in the international community, your adversary, to not fuck with your stuff.
Can I stop for a second? So are you essentially saying that if you have incredible capabilities of disrupting grids, power systems, and infrastructure, you wouldn't necessarily do it, but you might try it to make sure it works a little bit.
Exactly.
And that this is probably the hints of some of the stuff, because you got to
get your reps in, right? You got to get your reps in.
It's like okay, so suppose that I went to you and was like, "Hey, I bet I can kick your ass. Like, I bet I can like friggin' slap a rubber guard on you and like do whatever the fuck, right?" And you're like,
I love your expression, by the way.
Yeah, you look really convinced. It's because I'm jacked, right?
Well, no, there's people that look like you that could strangle me, believe it or not.
Oh,
there's a lot of like very high level Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belts that are just super nerds, and they don't lift weights at all. They only do jiu-jitsu, and if you only do jiu-jitsu, you'll have like a wiry body.
Dude, that was heartless. So just slip that in. Like, there's like two guys who look like you. It's like just real fucking
look like intelligent people. No, they're like some of the most brilliant people I've ever met. Really, that's the issue. It's like data nerds get really involved in jiu-jitsu. That's jiu-jitsu's data.
But here's the thing. So that's exactly it, right? So if I told you, I bet I can tap you out, right? And
I'd be like, where have you been training?
Well, right, but and if you're like, okay, my answer was, oh, I've just read a bunch of books.
Oh, okay.
You'd be like, oh, cool, let's go. Like, right? Because making contact with reality is where the fucking learning happens.
Exactly.
You can sit there and think all you want,
right?
But unless you've actually played the chess match, unless you've reached out, touched, seen what the reaction is and all this stuff, you don't actually know what you think you know, and that's actually extra dangerous. If you're sitting on a bunch of capabilities and you have this like unearned sense of superiority, because you haven't used those exquisite tools.
Right.
Like, it's a challenge.
And then you've got people that are head of departments, CEOs of corporations. Everyone has an ego. We've got it.
Yeah, and this ties into like how basically the international order and quasi-stability actually gets maintained. So there's like above threshold stuff, which is like you actually do wars for borders, and there's the potential for nuclear exchange or whatever. Like that's like all stuff that can't be hidden, right?
War games.
Exactly, like all the war games type shit. Then there's below threshold stuff. The stuff that's like it's always like the stuff that's like, hey, I'm gonna try to like poke you. Are you gonna react? What are you gonna do? And then if you do nothing here, then I go like, okay, what's the next level? I can poke you. Because like one of the things that we almost have an intuition for that's mistaken, that comes from kind of historical experience, is like this idea that that countries can actually really defend their citizens in a meaningful way. So like if you think back to World War I, the most sophisticated advanced nation states on the planet could not get past a line of dudes in a trench. Like that was the, and they tried like thing after thing. Let's try tanks, let's try aircraft, let's try fucking hot air balloons, infiltration, and it literally like the one side pretty much just ran out of dudes in that end of the war to put in their trench. And so we have this thought that like, oh, countries can actually put boundaries around themselves and actually, but the reality is there's so many surfaces. The surface area for attacks is just too great. And so there's stuff like you can actually like there's the Havana syndrome stuff where you look at this like ratcheting escalation, like, oh, let's like fry a couple of embassy staff's brains in Havana, Cuba. What are they going to do about it? Nothing? Okay, let's move on to Vienna, Austria, something a little bit more Western, a little bit more orderly. Let's see what they do there. Still nothing. Okay, what if we move on to frying like Americans' brains on U.S. soil, baby? And they went and did that. And so this is one of these things where like stability in reality in the world is not maintained through defense, but it's literally like you have like the Crips and the Bloods with different territories, and it's stable and it looks quiet. But the reason is that if you like beat the shit out of one of my guys for no good reason, I'm just gonna find one of your guys and I'll blow his fucking head off. And that keeps peace and stability on the surface. But that's the reality of sub-threshold competition between nation states. It's like, you come in and like, fuck with my boys, I'm going to fuck with your boys right back. And until we push back, they're going to keep pushing that limit further and further.
One important consequence of that too is like, if you want to avoid nuclear escalation, right, the answer is not to just take punches in the mouth over and over in the fear that eventually if you do anything, you're going to escalate to nukes. What all that does is it empowers the adversary to keep driving up the ratchet. Like what Ed's just described there is an increasing ratchet of unresponded adversary action. If you address the kind of sub-threshold stuff, if they cut an undersea cable and then there's a consequence for that shit, they're less likely to cut an undersea cable and things kind of stay at that level of the threshold, And
right. so just letting them burn out.
Yeah, exactly.
That logic, which is like, let them do it. They'll stop doing it after a while.
They'll get it out of their
They tried that during the George Floyd riots. Remember? That's what New York City did. Like, let's let them loose.
Let's just see how big Chaz gets.
Yeah. It's the summer of love.
Yeah, that's right.
Remember?
Yeah, and
yeah,
so
exactly.
The translation into like the super intelligence scenario is if we don't have our reps in, if we don't know how to reach out and touch an adversary and induce consequence for them doing the same to us, then we have no deterrence at all. Like we're basically just sitting right now. The state of security is the labs are like super, and like we can and probably should go deep on that piece, but like as one data point, right? So there's like double-digit percentages of the world's top AI labs or America's top AI labs of employees that are like Chinese nationals or have ties to the Chinese mainland, right? So that's great. Why don't we build them in?
Yeah, it's really funny, right?
Like, so it's so stupid.
But it's also like the challenge is when you talk to people who actually, when you talk to people who actually have experience dealing with like CCP activity in this space, right? Like there's one story that we heard that is probably worth like relaying here. Is like this guy from an intelligence agency was saying like, hey, so there was this power outage out in Berkeley, California back in like 2019 or something, and the internet goes out across the whole campus. And so there's this dorm, and like all of the Chinese students are freaking out because they have an obligation to do a time-based check-in and basically report back on everything they've seen and heard to basically a CCP handler type thing.
Right.
And if they don't, like, maybe your mother's insulin doesn't show up. Maybe your like brother's travel plans get denied. Maybe the family business gets shut down. Like, there's the range of options that this massive CCP state coercion machine has. This is like, they've got internal like software for this. Like, this is an institutionalized, like very well developed and efficient framework for just ratcheting up pressure on individuals overseas. And they believe the Chinese diaspora overseas belongs to them. If you look at like what the Chinese Communist Party writes in its written like public communications, they see like Chinese ethnicity as being a green. Like, it's like no one is a bigger victim of this than the Chinese people themselves who are abroad, who have made amazing contributions to American AI innovation. You just have to look at the names on the freaking papers. It's like these guys are wicked. But the problem is, we also have to look head on at this reality. Like, you can't just be like, oh, I'm not going to say it because it makes me feel funny inside. Someone has to stand up and point out the obvious, that if you're going to build a fucking Manhattan Project for superintelligence, and the idea is to like be doing that when China is a key rival nation state actor, yeah, you're going to have to find a way to account for the personnel security side. Like, at some point, someone's going to have to do something about that.
And it's like, you can see they're hitting us right where we're weak, right? Like, America is the place where you come and you remake yourself, like, send us, you're tired and you're hungry and you're poor. And
which is true and important.
It's true and important. They're playing right off of that because they know that we just don't want to look at that problem.
Yeah. And Chinese nationals working on these things is just bananas. The fact they have to check in with the CCP.
Yeah.
And are they being monitored? I mean, how much can you monitor them? What do you know that they have? What equipment have they been given?
You
So
can't
the best part,
constitutionally, right?
yeah,
You
the
can't
best part,
just spy on it.
constitutionally, it's also, you can't legally deny someone employment on that basis in a private company. So that's something else we found and we're kind of amazed by. And even honestly, just like the regular kind of government clearance process itself is inadequate. It moves way too slowly, and it doesn't actually even in the government. We were talking about top secret clearances. The information that they like look at for top secret, we heard from a couple of people, doesn't include a lot of like key sources. So for example, it doesn't include like foreign language sources. So if the head of the Ministry of State Security in China writes a blog post that says like, Bob is like the best spy. He spied so hard for us, and he's like an awesome spy. If that blog post is written in Chinese, we're not going to see it, and we're going to be like, "Here's your clearance, Bob. Congratulations!" Like, and we were like, "This that can't possibly be real," but like, yeah, they're like, "Yep, that's true."
No one's looking. It's complete naivete.
There's gaps in
Every level of the stack.
a lot of the
One of the worst things here is like the
That's so crazy.
yeah, the physical infrastructure. So the personnel thing is like fucked up. The physical infrastructure thing is another area where people don't want to look, because if you start looking, what you start to realize is, okay, China makes like a lot of our like components for our transformers for the electrical grid, yeah, but also all these chips that are going into our big data centers for these massive training runs. Where do they come from? They come from Taiwan. They come from this company called TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. We're increasingly onshoring that, by the way, which is one of the best things that's been happening lately, is like massive amounts of TSMC capacity getting onshored in the US, but still being made. Right now, it's basically like 100% there. All you have to do is jump on the network at TSMC, hack the right network, compromise the firmware on the software that runs on these chips to get them to run, and you basically can compromise all the chips going into all of these things. Never mind the fact that like Taiwan is like set like physically outside the Chinese sphere of influence for now. China is going to be prioritizing the fuck out of getting access to that. There have been cases, by the way, like Richard Chang, like the founder of SMIC, which is the TSMC, this massive like series of aircraft carrier fabrication facilities.
They do like all the iPhone chips.
Yeah.
They do the AI chips, which are the things we care about.
Yeah. They're the only place on planet Earth that does this. It's literally it's fascinating. It's like easily the most advanced manufacturing or scientific process that primates on planet Earth can do is this chip making process.
Nanoscale material science where you're putting on these tiny atom thick layers of stuff, and you're doing 300 of them in a row with you have insulators and conductors and different kinds of semiconductors and these tunnels and shit. Just the complexity of it is just awe-inspiring. That we can do this at all is it's magic. It's magic,
and it's really only being done in Taiwan.
That is the only place, truly the only place right now.
Wow.
And so a Chinese invasion of Taiwan just looks pretty interesting through that lens, right?
Boy.
Say goodbye to the iPhone, say goodbye to the chip supply that we rely on, and then your super intelligence training run, damn, that's interesting.
So I know Samsung was trying to develop a lab here or a semiconductor factory here, and they weren't having enough success.
So one of the craziest things, to illustrate how hard it is to do, so you spend $50 billion, again, an aircraft carrier, we're throwing that around here and there, but an aircraft carrier worth of risk capital. What does that mean? That means you build the factory, and it's not guaranteed it's going to work. At first, this factory is pumping out these chips at yields that are really low. In other words, only 20% of the chips that they're putting out are even useful, and that just makes it totally economically unviable. So you're just trying to increase that yield, desperately climb up higher and higher. Intel famously found this so hard that they have this philosophy where when they build a new fab, the philosophy is called copy exactly. Everything down to the color of the paint on the walls in the bathroom is copied from other fabs that actually worked because they have no idea why a fucking fab works and another one doesn't.
We got this to work. We got this to work. It's oh my God, we got this to work. I can't believe we got this to work. So we have to make it exactly identical because the expensive thing in the semiconductor manufacturing process is the learning curve. So like Jer said, you start by putting through a whole bunch of the starting material for the chips, which are called wafers. You put them through your fab. The fab has got 500 dials on it, and every one of those dials has got to be in the exact right place or the whole fucking thing doesn't work. So you send a bunch of wafers in at great expense. They come out all fucked up in the first run. It's just it's going to be all fucked up in the first run. Then what do? You get a bunch of PhDs, material scientists, engineers with scanning electron microscopes, because all this shit is atomic scale tiny. They look at all the chips and all the stuff that's gone wrong, oh shit, these pathways got fused or whatever. You just need that level of expertise, and then they go.
It's a mix, right?
It's a mix. Yeah. It's a mix now in particular, but you absolutely need humans looking at these things at a certain level, and then they go, well, okay, I've got a hypothesis about what might have gone wrong in that run. Let's tweak this dial like this and this dial like that, and run the whole thing again. And you hear these stories about bringing a fab online. You need a certain percentage of good chips coming out the other end, or you can't make money from the fab because most of your shit is just going right into the garbage.
Unless, and this is important too, your fab is state subsidized. So when you look at, TSMC is they're alone in the world in terms of being able to pump out these chips. But SMIC, this is the Chinese knockoff of TSMC, founded, by the way, by a former senior TSMC executive, Richard Chung, who leaves along with a bunch of other people with a bunch of fucking secrets. They get sued in the early 2000s. It's pretty obvious what happened there. To most people, they're yeah, SMIC fucking stole that shit. They bring a new fab online in a year or two, which is suspiciously fast, start pumping out chips. And now the Chinese ecosystem is ratcheting up, the government is pouring money into SMIC because they know that they can't access TSMC chips anymore because the U.S. government's put pressure on Taiwan to block that off. And so domestic fab in China is all about SMIC. And they are it's a disgusting amount of money they're putting in. They're teaming up with Huawei to form this complex of companies that it's really interesting. I mean, the semiconductor industry in China in particular is really, really interesting. It's also a massive story of like self-owns of the United States and the Western world, where we've been just shipping a lot of our shit to them for a long time.
Like the equipment that builds the chips. So like, and it's also like, it's so blatant, and like they're just, honestly, a lot of the stuff is just like they're just giving us like a big fuck you. So give you a really blatant example. So we have the way we set up export controls still today on most equipment that these semiconductor fabs use, like the Chinese semiconductor fabs use. We're still sending them a whole bunch of shit. The way we set export controls is, instead of like, oh, we're sending this gear to China and like now it's in China and we can't do anything about it. Instead, we still have this thing where we're like, no, this company in China is cool. That company in China is not cool. So we can ship to this company, but we can't ship to that company. And so you get this ridiculous shit. Like, for example, there's like a couple of facilities that you can see by satellite. One of the facilities is okay to ship equipment to. The other facility right next door is like considered, military connected or whatever, and so we can't ship. The Chinese literally built a bridge between the two facilities so they can just like shimmy the wafers over to like, oh, yeah, we use equipment, and like shimmy it back, and now, okay, we're done. So it's like, and you can see it by satellite, so they're not even like trying to hide it. Like our stuff is just like so badly put together.
China's prioritizing this so highly that like the idea that we're gonna, so we do it by company through this, basically it's like an export blacklist. Like you can't send to Huawei, you can't send to any number of other companies that are considered affiliated with the Chinese military or where we're concerned about military applications. Reality is, in China, civil military fusion is their policy. In other words, every private company, like, yeah, that's cute, dude. You're working for yourself. Yeah, no, buddy. You're working for the Chinese state. We come in, we want your shit, we get your shit. There's no like, there's no true kind of distinction between the two.
Right.
And so when you have this attitude where you're like, yeah, we're gonna have some companies where like you can't send to them, but you can, that creates a situation where literally Huawei will spin up like a dozen subsidiaries or new companies with new names that aren't on our blacklist. And so,
have you been sitting on a smart business idea and need to get it online?
our blacklist. And so, like for months or years, you're able to just ship chips to them. Nowhere, and that's to say nothing of like using intermediaries like Singapore or other countries.
Oh yeah, you would believe the number of AI chips that are shipping to Malaysia. Can't wait for the latest like
data
language model to come out of Malaysia. And actually, it's just proxying for the most part. There's some amount of stuff actually going on in Malaysia, but for the most part, it's
how can the United States compete? If you're thinking about all these different factors, you're thinking about espionage, people that are students from CCP connected, contacting. You're talking about all the different network equipment that has third-party input. You could siphon off data, and then on top of that, state-funded. Everything is encouraged by the state, inexorably connected. You can't get away from it. You do what's best for the Chinese government.
Well, so step one is you gotta stem the bleeding, right? So right now, OpenAI pumps out a new massive scaled AI model. You better believe that like the CCP has a really good chance they're going to get their hands on that, right? So if all you do right now is you ratchet up capabilities, it's like that meme of like there's a motorboat or something and some guy who's like surfing behind and there's a string attaching them and the motorboat guy goes like, hurry up, like accelerate, they're catching up. That's kind of what's happening right now is we're helping them accelerate,
pulling them along.
Yeah, pulling them along. Now, I will say, like, over the last 6 months especially, where our focus has shifted is, like, how do we actually build, like, the secure data set? Like, what does it look like to actually lock this down? And also, crucially, you don't want the security measures to be so irritating and invasive that they slow down the progress. Like, there's this kind of dance that you have to do. So this is part of what was in the redacted version of the report, because we don't want to telegraph that necessarily, but there are ways that you can get a really good 80-20. Like there are ways that you can play with things that are already, built, and have a lower risk of them having been compromised.
And look, a lot of the stuff as well that we're talking about, like big problems around China, a lot of this is like us just like tripping over our own feet and self-owning ourselves.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, like, the Chinese are trying to indigenize as fast as they can. Totally true. But the gear that they're putting in their facilities, like the machines that actually like do this, like we talked about atomic patterning 300 layers, the machines that do that, for the most part, are shipped in from the West, are shipped in from the Netherlands, shipped in from Japan, from us, from like allied countries. And the reason that's happening is like in many cases, you'll have this it's like honestly a little disgusting, but like CEOs and executives of these companies will brief like the administration officials and say like, look, like if you guys like cut us off from China, from selling to China, like our business is going to suffer, like American jobs are going to suffer, and it's going to be really bad. And then a few weeks later, they turn around in their earnings calls and they go like, you know what, yeah, so we expect like export controls or whatever, but it's really not going to have a big impact on us. And the really fucked up part is if they lie to their shareholders on their earnings calls and their stock price goes down, their shareholders can sue them. If they lie to the administration on an issue of critical national security interest, fuck all happens to them.
Wow.
It's great incentives.
And this is, by the way, it's like one reason why it's so important that we not be constrained in our thinking about like we're going to build a Fort Knox. Like this is where the interactive, messy, adversarial environment is so important. You have to introduce consequence. Like you have to create a situation where they perceive that if they try to do an espionage operation or intelligence operation, there will be consequences. That's right now not happening. And so it's just, and that's kind of a historical artifact over like a lot of time spent hand wringing over, well, what if they, and then eventually nukes. And like that kind of thinking is, if you dealt with your kid when you're raising them, if you dealt with them that way and you were like, hey, so little Timmy just like he stole his first toy, and like now's the time where you're gonna like a good parent would be like, all right, little Timmy, fucking come over here, you son of a bitch, take the fucking thing, and we're gonna bring it over to the people who stole it from you.
He's a great father.
Make the apology. I love my daughter, by the way. But you're like,
Timmy's a fake baby.
Timmy's a fake baby, hypothetical baby. There's no. He's crying right now. Anyway, so yeah,
Stealing right now.
That's a Jesus shit. I gotta stop there. But yeah, anyway, so you go through this thing, and you can do that, or you can be like, oh no, if I tell Timmy to return it, then maybe Timmy's gonna hate me. Maybe then Timmy's gonna like become increasingly adversarial, and then when he's in high school, he's gonna start taking drugs, and then eventually he's gonna like fall afoul of the law, and then end up on the street. Like if that's the story you're telling yourself, and you're terrified of any kind of adversarial interaction, it's not even adversarial, it's constructive actually. You're training the child just like you're training your adversary to respect your national boundaries and your sovereignty. That those two things are like that's what you're up to. It's human beings all the way down.
Jesus. Yeah, but we can get out of our own way. Like a lot of this stuff. Yeah. Like when you look into it, it's like us just being in our own way, and a lot of this comes from the fact that like since 1991, since the fall of the Soviet Union, we have kind of internalized this attitude that like, well, like we just won the game and like it's our world and you're living in it, and like we just don't have any peers that are adversaries. And so there's been generations of people who just haven't actually internalized the fact that like no, there's people out there who not only like are willing to like fuck with you all the way, but who have the capability to do it.
And we could, by the way, we could if we wanted to. We could
absolutely could if we wanted to.
There's this is worth like calling out. There's this like sort of two camps right now in the world of AI, kind of like national security. There's the people who are worried about they're so concerned about like the idea that we might lose control of these systems that they go, okay, we need to strike a deal with China. Right? There's no way out. We have to strike a deal with China. And then they start spinning up all these theories about how they're going to do that, none of which remotely reflect the actual reality. When you talk to the people who work on this, who try to do track 1, track 1.5, track 2, or more accurately, the ones who do the intel stuff, like this is a non-starter for reasons we get into. But they have that attitude because they're like, fundamentally, we don't know how to control this technology. The flip side is people who go, oh yeah, like I work in the IC or the State Department, and I'm used to dealing with these guys. The Chinese, They're not trustworthy. Forget it. So our only solution is to figure out the whole control problem, and almost like therefore it must be possible to control the AI systems, because like you just can't see a solution. You just can't see a solution in front of you because you understand that problem so well. And so everything we've been doing with this is looking at how can we actually take both of those realities seriously. There's no actual reason why those two things shouldn't be able to exist in the same head. Yes, China's not trustworthy. Yes, we actually don't, like, every piece of evidence we have right now suggests that, like, if you build a super intelligent system that's vastly smarter than you, I mean, yeah, like your basic intuition that sounds like a hard thing to fucking control is about right. Like there's no solid evidence that's conclusive either way. Where that leaves you is about 50-50. So yeah, we ought to be taking that really fucking seriously, and there's evidence pointing in that direction. Yeah. But so the question is, like, if those two things are true, then what do you do? And so few people seem to want to take both of those things seriously, because taking one seriously almost like reflexively makes you reach for the other, when is taking one seriously almost like reflexively makes you reach for the other, when they're both not there. And part of the answer here is you got to do things like reach out to your adversary. So we have the capacity to slow down if we wanted to Chinese development. We actually could. We need to have a serious conversation about when and how. But the fact of that not being on the table right now for anyone, because people who don't trust China just don't think that the AI risk or won't acknowledge that the issue with control is real, because that's just too worrisome. And there's this concern about, oh no, but then runaway escalation. People who take the loss of control thing seriously just want to have a kumbaya moment with China, which is never going to happen. And so the framework around that is one of consequence. You gotta flex the muscle and put in the reps and get ready for potentially, if you have a late stage rush to super intelligence, you want to have as much margin as you can, so you can invest in potentially not even having to make that final leap in building the super intelligence. That's one option that's on the table if you can actually degrade the adversary's capabilities.
There's some people. Well, how would you degrade the adversary's capabilities?
The same way, well, not exactly the same way they would degrade ours, but think about all the infrastructure and like this is stuff that maybe we'll have to point you in the direction of some people who can walk you through the details offline. But there are a lot of ways that you can degrade infrastructure, adversary infrastructure. A lot of those are the same techniques they use on us. It's the infrastructure for these training runs is super delicate, right? Like, I mean, you need to
have the limit of what's possible.
Yeah.
And when stuff is at the limit of what's possible, then it's, I mean, to give you an example that's public, right? You remember like Stuxnet? Like the Iranian,
yes.
Yeah. So the thing about Stuxnet was like,
explain to people, it was the nuclear program.
So the Iranians had their nuclear program in like the 2010s, and they were enriching uranium with their centrifuges, which is like spinning really fast. And the centrifuges were in a room where there's no people; they were being monitored by cameras, right? And so and the whole thing was air gapped, which means that it was not connected to the internet, and all the machines, the computers that ran their shit was like separated and separated. So what happened is somebody got a memory stick in there somehow that had this Stuxnet program on it, and put it in, and boom, now all of a sudden it's in their system. So it jumped the air gap, and now like our side basically has our software in their systems. And the thing that it did was not just that it broke their centrifuges or shut down their program. It spun the centrifuges faster and faster and faster.
The centrifuges that are used to enrich the uranium.
Yeah. These are basically just like machines that spin uranium super fast to enrich it. They spin it faster and faster and faster until they tear themselves apart. But the really, like, honestly dope ass thing that it did was it put in a camera feed of everything was normal. So the guy at the control is like watching, and he's like checking the camera feed. It's like, looks cool, looks fine. In the meantime, you got this like explosions going on, like uranium like blasting everywhere. And so you can actually get into a space where you're not just like fucking with them, but you're fucking with them and they actually can't tell that that's what's happening. And in fact, I believe actually, and Jamie might be able to check this, but that the Stuxnet thing was designed initially to look like from top to bottom like it was fully accidental, but got discovered by I think like a third party cyber security company that just by accident found out about it. And so what that means also is like there could be any number of other Stuxnets that happened since then, and we wouldn't fucking know about it because it all can be made to look like an accident.
Well, that's insane. So, but if we do that to them, they're going to do that to us as well.
Yep.
And so is this like mutually assured technology destruction?
Well, so if we can reach parity in our ability to intercede and kind of go in and do this, then yes, right now the problem is they hold us at risk in a way that we simply don't hold them at risk. And so this idea, and there's been a lot of debate right now in the AI world. You might have seen actually, so Elon's AI advisor put out this idea of essentially this mutually assured AI malfunction main. It's like mutually assured destruction, but for AI systems like this. You know, there are some issues with it, including the fact that it doesn't reflect the asymmetry that currently exists between the U.S. and China. Like all our infrastructure is made in China. All our infrastructure is penetrated in a way that theirs simply is not. When you actually talk to the folks who know the space, who've done operations like this, it's really clear that that's an asymmetry that needs to be resolved. And so building up that capacity is important. I mean, look, the alternative is we start riding the dragon and we get really close to that threshold where we're about to build OpenAI is about to build super intelligence or something. It gets stolen and then the training run gets polished off, finished up in China or whatever. All the same as supply. It's just that it's China doing it to us and not the reverse. And obviously a CCP AI is a Xi Jinping AI. I mean, that's really what it is. Even people at the like Politburo level around him are probably in some trouble at that point because this guy doesn't need you anymore.
So yeah, this is actually one of the things about like so people talk about like okay, if you have a dictatorship with super intelligence, it's gonna allow the dictator to get like perfect control over the population or whatever. But the thing is like it's kind of like even worse than that because you actually imagine where you're at. You're a dictator, like you don't give a shit by and large about people. You have super intelligence. All the economic output eventually you can get from an AI, including from like you get humanoid robots, which are kind of like come out or whatever. So eventually you just have this AI that produces all your economic output. So what do you even need people for at all? And that's fucking scary because it rises all the way up to the level. You can actually think about like as we get close to this threshold, and as like particularly in China, they maybe are approaching. You can imagine like the Politburo meeting, like a guy looking across at Xi Jinping and being like, "Is this guy gonna fucking kill me when he gets to this point?" And so you can imagine, like maybe we're gonna see some
like when you can automate the management of large organizations with AIs, agents, or whatever that you don't need to buy the loyalty of in any way, that you don't need to kind of manage or control. That's a pretty existential question if your regime is based on power. It's one of the reasons why America actually has a pretty structural advantage here with separation of power, with our democratic system and all that stuff. If you can make a credible case that you have an oversight system for the technology that diffuses power, even if it is you make a Manhattan Project, you secure it as much as you can. There's not just like one dude who's going to be sitting at a console or something. There's some kind of separation of powers, or diffusion of power, I should say. That's already.
What would that look like?
Something as simple as like what we do with nuclear command codes. You need multiple people to sign off on a thing. Maybe they come from different parts of the government. Like
how do you worry? The issue is that they can be captured, right?
Oh yeah,
totally.
Anything can be captured,
especially something that's that consequential.
100%, and that's always a risk. The key is basically like, can we do better than China incredibly on that front. Because if we can do better than China and we have some kind of leadership structure, that actually changes the incentives potentially, because
for our allies and partners,
and even for Chinese people themselves.
Like, you guys play this out in your head, like what happens when super intelligence becomes sentient? You play this out,
like sentient as in
self-aware.
Self-aware,
not just self-aware, but able to act on its own. It achieves
autonomous.
autonomy. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Sentient and then achieves autonomy.
So the challenge is once you get into super intelligence, everybody loses the plot, right? Because at that point, things become possible that by definition we can't have thought of. So any attempt to kind of extrapolate beyond that gets really, really hard.
Have you ever tried though?
Oh, we've had a lot of conversations like tabletop exercise type stuff where we're like, okay, what might this look like? What are some of the,
what's worst case scenario?
Well, worst case scenario is actually there's a number of different worst case scenarios. This is turning into a really fun upbeat conversation.
This is the big boss extension of the human race, right?
Oh
The
yeah,
extinction of the human race seems like.
I think anybody who doesn't acknowledge that is either lying or confused, right? Like if you actually have an AI system, and this is the question, so let's assume that that's true. You have an AI system that can automate anything that humans can do, including making bioweapons, including making offensive cyber weapons, including all the shit. Then if you put, and okay, so theoretically this could go kumbaya wonderfully because you have a George Washington type who is the guy who controls it, who uses it to distribute power beautifully and perfectly, and that's certainly kind of the way that a lot of positive scenarios have to turn out at some point, though none of the labs will kind of admit that, or there's kind of gesturing at that idea that we'll do the right thing when the time comes. OpenAI has done this a lot. Like they're all about like, oh yeah, well not right now, but we'll live up anyway. We should get into the Elon lawsuit, which is actually kind of fascinating in that sense. But so there's a world where one bad person controls it. And they're just vindictive, or the power goes to their head, which happens to. We've been talking about that,
or the autonomous AI itself, right? Because the thing is, you imagine an AI like this, and this is something that people have been thinking about for 15 years, and in some level of technical depth, even of why would this happen? Which is you have an AI that has some goal. It matters what the goal is, but it doesn't matter that much. It could have kind of any goal almost. Imagine its goal is the paperclip example is the typical one, but you could just have a goal make a lot of money for me or anything. Well, most of the paths to making a lot of money, if you really want to make a fuck ton of money, however you define it, go through taking control of things and go through
Fucking commercials. Come on.
Making yourself smarter, right? The smarter you are, the more ways of making money you're going to find. And so from the AI's perspective, it's well, I just want to, build more data centers to make myself smarter. I want to hijack more compute to make myself smarter. I want to do all these things. And that starts to encroach on us and starts to be disruptive to us. And it's hard to know. This is one of these things where it's when you dial it up to 11, what's actually going to happen, nobody can know for sure, simply because it's exactly like if you were playing in chess against Magnus Carlsen, right? You can predict Magnus is going to kick your ass. Can you predict exactly what moves he's going to do? No, because if you could, then you would be as good at chess as he is, because you could just play those moves. So all we can say is this thing's probably going to kick our ass in the real world.
There's also evidence. So it used to be, right, that this was a purely hypothetical argument based on a